Final Fight 3 is criminally underrated. While the original game in the series often steals the spotlight, third installment in the trilogy remains strangely absent from most conversations, despite being considered by a few to be the best of the whole bunch. But why? Well, today we're diving deep into this forgotten chapter in gaming history to uncover the truth. Could Final Fight 3 be a hidden gem, quietly waiting for its moment to shine? Or is there a reason it has slipped into obscurity, left to gather dust in the shadows of its predecessors? Well, join us as we unravel the mystery to find out. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of Final Fight 3, the game that not enough people played. Yeah. As we've often discussed, Final Fight was nothing short of a triumph for Capcom when it hit the scene in 1989. This high-quality title not only helped define the beat-em-up genre, but set the stage for countless imitators and successors. In fact, when the game was ported as a Super Nintendo exclusive, it inadvertently sparked the creation of Sega's Streets of Rage series for the Mega Drive, a franchise many considered the pinnacle of beat-em-up games. But beneath this success, there were some missteps along the way. The original Final Fight Super Nintendo port came with its own set of blunders, the most infamous being the lack of cooperative play, a cornerstone of the beat-em-up experience. As time marched on, Final Fight 2 sought to correct this, adding 2-player co-op and expanding the roster with 3 playable characters. This entry differed in that, unlike the original, which began life in the arcades before being ported to the Super Nintendo, Final Fight 2 was crafted exclusively for the console from the ground up. Yet despite these improvements, many fans still favour the original over its sequel, which instantly raises the question, why? Perhaps the answer lies in the noticeable graphical downgrade. Looking at this game, the visuals of Final Fight 2 seemed scaled back. However, this might have been a deliberate choice, a way to pack more enemies onto the screen without overwhelming the hardware and addressing some of the limitations seen in the previous installment's SNES port. While the Final Fight franchise itself has been on hiatus for quite some time, we can still dive into the electric streets of Metro City with the exhilarating Street Fighter 6, set in the same iconic location as the legendary beat-em-up. By using my affiliate links, you won't just save, you'll score an astounding 48% off the game, plus you can grab the game's Year 2 Season Pass at a massive discount and unlock the fearsome M. Bison. Click through the links in my pinned comments and receive up to 90% off a vast array of AAA, indie, modern and retro titles. Start your next game and adventure for nearly nothing. Happy gaming and even happier savings. So we've navigated the highs and lows of the first 2 Super Nintendo entries in the Final Fight series. But what about the overlooked third installment, Final Fight 3? Released exclusively for the Super Nintendo in 1995, this game arrived a full 6 years after the series' arcade debut. But why did it take so long, and with a new producer at the helm, could it live up to its predecessors? With this later Super Nintendo release, the reins of production were handed over to Tokaru Fujiwara, a seasoned Capcom veteran known for directing iconic titles like Ghosts and Goblins, Commando, and Bionic Commando. So with such an impressive track record, was Fujiwara the perfect choice to breathe new life into this beloved series? Let's explore. Picking up where the previous games left off, Final Fight 3 introduces us to the ruins of the Mad Gear Gang, now replaced by a new and formidable threat, the Skullcross Gang. As they start to wreak havoc across Metro City, we see the return of a familiar face in the opening sequence, Guy from the original Final Fight, a playable character who was noticeably absent from Final Fight 2. Rumour has it, canonically, his absence was due to him being busy in the Street Fighter Alpha series, as yes, Final Fight and Street Fighter share the same universe. So this intriguing crossover places Final Fight 3 after the events of the Alpha games, as well as its own predecessors. But regardless of the novel lore surrounding these games, did this one truly stand out? Or does it simply retread familiar territory? As Guy makes his dramatic return to Metro City, he reunites with his old friend Mike Hagar, the city's formidable mayor. They're thrust into immediate action. Why? Because the Skullcross Gang has just ignited a riot in the city's downtown core. The urgency of this situation is brought to their attention by none other than Lucia, a sharp detective from the Metro City Police Special Crimes Unit, who would later join the playable roster of Street Fighter V as well. Adding to the lineup, we get another new fighter to play as, Dean, a Street Fighter with a mysterious past. Together, this diverse group of heroes is once again called upon to rid their city of a burgeoning crime wave. But of course, being a classic beat-em-up series, there's way more to Final Fight 3 than just its narrative, with its action-orientated gameplay obviously being the primary focus. Like its predecessor, this installment allows players to dive into the action with a friend in cooperative mode. As you know, a feature that was sorely lacking in Final Fight's original Super Nintendo outing. This time, however, the game expands its roster from 3 to 4 selectable characters, enhancing the cooperative experience and providing more choice than ever. What's more, for those who prefer to go solo, there's an option to have the second player controlled by the CPU, a thoughtful addition for players who like a sidekick but might not have a human friend to call their own. Like in any good brawler, each fighter in Final Fight 3 brings their own distinct flair to the streets. They don't just punch and kick, they come with a unique arsenal of moves, techniques and abilities that differentiate them from each other, fulfilling the expectations of fans who've come to appreciate the depth of the series' combat system. New gameplay mechanics such as the ability to dash, execute dash attacks, and perform jumping dash attacks make this combat-wise the richest Final Fight yet. This adds a fresh dynamic to the brawls. Additionally, grabs and throws are also on the menu, allowing for even more combat creativity. In the intricate world of Final Fight 3, players are introduced to new evolved mechanics that deeply intertwine with the lore of Capcom's universe. Now characters can unleash command-based special techniques, reminiscent of the super moves from the Street Fighter series. Consider the connection, both franchises share a universe, making this crossover mechanic a clever nod to fans. More specifically, Final Fight 3 incorporates a super move gauge, similar to that of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which fields as players land attacks. But here's a twist unique to Final Fight. If not used timely, the gauge diminishes on its own, adding another strategic layer to each battle. Venturing further into the streets of Metro City, players find familiar elements like weapons and health restoring items, all stashed within smashable containers. However, Final Fight 3 introduces a personalised touch to weaponry. What I mean by this is that each character is adept with a specific weapon, unlocking the potential for devastating combo attacks when the right arsenal is in hand. Making this game all the more impressive, the adventure through Metro City isn't linear. Each stage in Final Fight 3 offers multiple paths, leading to different areas teeming with unique enemies and bosses. This feature not only enhances the game's depth, but significantly boosts its replay value. Depending on the chosen path, the game's difficulty level, and the character selected, players can unlock a variety of endings, compelling them to return to the streets again and again. So to continue to see what is different about this game comparatively to what came before it, let's dive into the stage design of Final Fight 3. The opening stage of this Super Nintendo title might strike a familiar chord. It mirrors the first scene from the original Final Fight game. Interestingly, despite the 6-year development gap, this new iteration appears less refined than its older counterpart in places. This might raise eyebrows regarding if the art style regressed over the years, but likely, just with Final Fight 2, it was engineered this way to perform better on the Super Nintendo. As we venture further, the character and enemy sprites, although acceptable, retain a pixelated aesthetic, similar to that seen in Final Fight 2, rather than the crisp visuals that mark the original. This choice might leave fans pondering the technological advancements, or perhaps the lack thereof between installments. So not everything about this one is better than what could be experienced with the first entry. The level's narrative is laid out with commendable clarity though, in design, which deserves applauding. For example, at the end of a riot-torn street, players crash into what appears to be a prison. The backdrop of this stage tells a vivid story. Prisoners peer from their cells and holes in the walls suggest a recent breakout. Obviously, this level of visual storytelling does a great job of conveying the chaos that has engulfed the city, further bringing the world to life. After a dramatic flying kick of a wall, which surprisingly reveals the prison's questionable security, the characters emerge into sunlight, only to find more devastation and a layer of gritty realism to the gameplay. The opening stage that does a good job of setting a tone for the game concludes with a boss fight against a towering figure dressed as a police officer named Dave, only further underscoring the anarchy within Metro City with the fact that even the police have ended up on the wrong side of the law. Building on the narrative, as the stage ends, a text scroll bluntly informs players that the riot was merely a distraction to free prisoners, a revelation already made evident by the level design. As we delve deeper into Final Fight 3, the story continues to unfold, adding significant depth to the characters' motivations. We learn that Dean, one of the new characters, is driven by a poignant backstory. His family was brutally murdered by the gang for his refusal to join them as a street fighter. This sets the stage for his quest for revenge and the personal stake to the ongoing battle against the gang's tyranny. As for stage design, it continues to impress and intrigue as we enter Stage 2. This stage starts off with a nostalgic nod to the original arcade game, resembling its first stage even more closely than our previous setting. However, it quickly diverges by incorporating vertical scrolling, a dynamic feature first seen in Final Fight 2, which adds an extra dimension to the gameplay. The atmosphere remains starkly dystopian, further immersing players in the game's gritty world. As the player moves along, they encounter a variety of enemies, including a fatty boom boom, a barefooted giant who blocks the way at the end of the street. The journey continues into a park area that might remind players of scenes from Streets of Rage 2, showcasing Capcom's ability to draw inspiration while still giving nods to its own influential designs from the past. The stage culminates with a battle against a formidable foe, testing the player's combat skills and strategy. If you can get past this challenge, the excitement sparks in round 3, set against a backdrop of car showroom storefronts. Here the interactive environment comes into play, with glass windows that can shatter dramatically during a skirmish, a detail that would surely earn a smashing if it were to catch James Bond's eye. Despite being shorter, this round packs intensity with the return of familiar foes in new forms, challenging players to adapt and refine their tactics. Round 4 of our journey through Final Fight 3 takes us to a quintessential beat-em-up setting, a city bridge bathed in the glow of a stunning sunset. A visual treat that never seems to grow old despite its frequent use in games from the 90s. As we've noted before, it's almost a rite of passage for brawlers to include such a scene. From the bridge, the action transitions to a waterfront, echoing a similar setting from the original Final Fight, further indulging in nostalgic design elements. Continuing the journey, the stage transitions onto a boat, another setting that has become almost mandatory in the genre. Here the developers have added a dynamic element where the platform undulates, simulating the bobbing of a boat on the water, enhancing the physical feeling of the brawl, and if you squint hard enough, the stage boss seems to be Bluto from the Popeye cartoon. For those pushing forward, next players encounter a bonus round that involves dodging a bulldozer, a concept which was also used in Streets of Rage 3. The narrative and thematic scenery continues to unfold as players descend into the sewers, another overly familiar backdrop in beat-em-ups, complete with a cowabunga dudes vibe. Past here, the setting eventually shifts to an industrial scene, yet another common trope, with the inclusion of enemies reminiscent of the baseball furies from the Warriors movie. Soon, players encounter a boss battle against a character named Stray, but unfortunately it lacks the punch you'd expect in an epic showdown. One thing worth noting is that the music stays the same during boss fights, which is a real missed opportunity. Without that shift in tone, like the pulsing pounding scores in Streets of Rage boss fights, the sense of heightened tension is lost here. You don't get that rush of adrenaline or the feeling that a major challenge is looming. It just kind of rolls along like any other fight, which is a shame considering how polished a lot of this game feels. As for the final stage, whether you've played games like Final Fight or Streets of Rage, you'll get a serious case of deja vu. You start by walking along a path towards a building and then battle through a skyscraper that screams Trump Tower. Let's be honest, is a beat 'em up even a beat 'em up if it doesn't end in a Trump Tower? It's all the usual stuff: control rooms, ornate elevators, red carpet hallways with huge windows, and waves of tougher enemies thrown at you in greater numbers. It's almost like a checklist of beat 'em up cliches, and there's nothing fresh or surprising about it. But then again, do we really need it to be? I'll leave that one for you to answer in the comment section. To give credit though where credit is due in terms of novelty, the final boss encounter does have a nice twist. It takes place on the rooftop next to a helicopter, which adds a cool cinematic flair. I almost expected to find Mr. X lounging on a throne at the end. Instead though, the main villain, Black, shows up looking like Relento after a serious dose of steroids. Beating him finally wraps up the game, and while it's not the most original conclusion, the rooftop showdown at least stands out as a fun finale. As mentioned earlier in the video, Final Fight 3 offers multiple ways to play, giving players access to levels that don't appear in every playthrough. In fairness, some of these stages are a bit more inspired than the ones I've highlighted here, but even those are built around all of the old cliches. For example, there's the ever-present train stage, a fight set in front of crushed cars, another in front of neon-lit buildings, and the obligatory restaurant stage. While there's some variety, it's mostly just familiar territory for fans of the genre. However, when we bear in mind that it's on the Super Nintendo, and the system doesn't have beat-em-ups in abundance, this is one of the very best the platform has to offer. While not original, the game is really solid fun, and if I was to provide you with any reason as to why not many people play this one, in comparison to many of the arcade greats, it is because it came out in a period whereby the 2D beat-em-up was no longer popular. In a world where players have moved on to Tekken and Virtua Fighter for their martial arts delights, there was not a great deal of interest in this humble 16-bit title, which is a shame as it is thoroughly decent. Despite being released in 1995, Final Fight 3 offers some unique and standout features that add to its charm, especially for fans of classic beat-em-ups. One of the game's biggest strengths is, as mentioned, its inclusion of branching paths, which provides replay value and allows players to experience different stages of each playthrough. This mechanic was ahead of its time, encouraging exploration and offering a fresh take on how progression could work in the genre. The game also built on the previously established Final Fight formula by introducing a larger, more diverse character roster, allowing players to experiment with different fighting styles and strategies. This variety, combined with the multiple pathways, ensures that no two playthroughs feel exactly the same, a feature that many beat-em-ups at the time lacked. That's without even mentioning the inclusion of super meters that added some extra depth to combat too. While Final Fight 3 may have been released during a time when next-gen consoles like the Sega Saturn and PlayStation were on the rise, it serves as a nostalgic tribute to the arcade glory days. Its visual style might not push the boundaries of what was possible in 1995, but it maintains the gritty, colourful aesthetic that fans of the series loved. The familiar settings, the train stages, neon-lit cityscapes and bustling restaurant brawls are less a rehash and more a celebration of everything that made the genre iconic. Much like Golden Axe 3, Final Fight 3 finds its strength in simplicity, offering a straightforward, enjoyable beat-em-up experience with just enough new elements to keep it fresh. It's a love letter to fans of classic arcade-style action, complete with all the tropes that made those games memorable, and it holds up as a solid, if nostalgic, entry in Capcom's beloved series, and that, my friends, is why it's criminally underrated. Don't forget you can revisit Metro City and get a huge discount on Street Fighter 6 and its Year 2 Season Pass, as well as receive massive money off of thousands of other games simply by using my affiliate link via the pinned comment. Happy shopping and cheerio!